what I'd love to do to start this discussion is really like, what is burnout? Like, can we make it a tangible thing? Like, how and what is going on in my brain, my body? Like, tell me what it is so I can have maybe a little more respect for that moment.
Yeah. Well, I think it is such an amorphous, overwhelming experience, and most people don't know what it is. They just have a vague sense of feeling heavy or tired or exhausted, and the weekend or a week off not being enough. So let's start with the research. When I burned out in 2004, as a busy hospitalist physician, I was 34 years old. So you and I are about the same age, going through a lot of the same things. When I burned out, as a doctor, I didn't even know what it was, because the people who came to me, I would call it stress leave. And when the employee assistance program, so if someone's struggling in a company or whatever, and then they go to the EAP sends them to me. I had two things I could do for people that I thought were stressed out. I could write them, if I thought it was, a real thing, I would write them a prescription for time off that would be paid by their employer. The second thing I could do was give them some cocktail of medications, depending on the context of what they were telling me. Do they need antidepressant, anti-anxiety, sleep medication? There's like some cocktail of medications I can give them to help them with their symptoms. That's really effective because they're a bullet train almost going into a brick wall. So my job is to stop that from happening, or if it's already happened, slow their world down and help them through the crisis. So when I burned out, it was literally that for me. And I remember talking to a colleague and thinking I had just sidelined him, because basically what happened is I walked in, I was, doing things in the hospital, but I was so busy. And I said to a nurse, "Hey, Nina, would you please give 40 milliequivalents of IV potassium to the gentleman in 636, which in itself requires a lot of cognition, right?"
Yes.
And she said,
"Yeah, interesting.
Hey, Dr. Sangwan, are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" And that was my first indication I might not be. And I said, "Yeah, why?" And she said, "That's the fourth time in under 5 minutes that you've asked me that same question, and I've answered you every time." I had no recollection that was going on. So I was literally already hitting that wall. And what I'm really grateful for is that she had the confidence to question me. Because
for sure,
I could have prescribed the wrong medication. She could have talked about me to someone else. But she had the wherewithal to say, "Are you okay?" And so one thing I want you to know about burnout is sometimes other people in your life recognize it for you before you do. And you want to be grateful for them. You don't want to be defensive. And you mentioned at the beginning this high-performing piece. The way I say it is, the way we became high-performing, taking care of the house, perhaps working, doing all these things that we do, is because we've learned to push through our body rather than partner with it.
Yes.
And we do this in many
different so well
ways.
said.
We do it in so many ways. Like, I'll tell you mine. When I was a busy doctor in the hospital, crazy. 2 ice cold 16-ounce Mountain Dews plus a king-size Snickers bar, and you could get me through a 36-hour shift without sleep. So each of us has the strategies, the coping mechanisms, the ways that we figure out when our body is giving us important signals, how to override that to get over the deadline, to get over the next meeting, the next day, the next week. And so while that serves us, so in the end, it ends up not serving us. But for a period of time, it tricks us. Okay. Yeah. So what is burnout? Let's talk about I burned out in 2004. In 2003, it was not even acknowledged as a, medical syndrome. It was I think maybe there's this extensive tiredness and fatigue and things, it was nothing. It wasn't until 2019 that the World Health Organization said, "Okay, we think it's prolonged unmanaged stress at work." At work? My whole thing is it doesn't matter whether it's at work or at home. There could be a special needs child
Yeah.
at home. There could be a troubled relationship at home. There could be your sister who's struggling. And of course, it could be unmanaged stress at work. But this is what I want to say. I think the WHO is going to come around, the World Health Organization.
I'm so happy.
Well,
you have
I
belief
don't
in
know
them.
when.
That's amazing.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know when, but I think someday it won't just be labeled at work. So wherever you have stress that is causing, this is how I say it, but wherever you are from burned out to fully charged can be measured by whether you have a net gain or a net drain of energy on a physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual level.
Okay.
So each of us comes here as uniquely as our fingerprint. In the end, it's the same exhaustion, but there's been an ongoing drain of energy for a long time. So the definition of burnout is a triad. The first part is, yes, physical, mental, emotional exhaustion. Second is, after that's been going on for a while, your physiology, Mother Nature's like made too beautiful of a machine. It adjusts.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
So, I know, right?
Strongly agree. I strongly agree. And we don't give it Mother Nature enough credit for this amazing body we get to live in. So, yeah.
And so
absolutely.
it's
Go ahead.
this adjustment that goes on inside us, whether it's our blood pressure, heart rate, moving, all of this. We can recover sometimes with sleep, et cetera. Then we start doing these things that are like, hey, can you make my coffee this morning? Can you make it a double? I'm having a rough week. And we start to adjust on the outside as well. So we've been exhausted for a while. And then the second piece of the triad comes in, which is a combination of two things, really. An undercurrent of cynicism, where your mind joins in the fatigue and says something like, no matter how hard I work or I try, I don't know that it's really going to make a difference. And so now all of a sudden your thinking becomes the undertow to this exhaustion and challenge physically, mentally. And now you start doing things like, even if you're lonely or isolated or working at home or whatever it is, you start pulling away from anything social or interacting because you just don't have the energy, even though you need it. You want the community. You have this thing called depersonalization where you start pulling away and you start referring, like I did that day, the guy in 636. I didn't say Mr. Jones. I didn't say Miss, whatever. I'm starting to depersonalize. Okay. So we have the exhaustion. We have the cynicism / depersonalization that starts going on. And then the third part of the triad is ineffectiveness. And I gave you a really good example of that when I hit that wall of saying the same thing 5 times in a row and not registering the answer.
Yep. So I think that is beautiful, and thank you for the spectrum, because I resonate actually with everything you said.